Good morning and welcome to Man & Machine's second virtual event of 2021. My name is Nathan Brownsword, Sales Manager here at Man & Machine. I'm delighted to bring you a 2.5-hour event today where we're going to be looking at Revit in a BIM and digital workflow. I think first things first, I appreciate that given the circumstances or the exceptional circumstances we find ourselves in, I hope everyone is well. They're doing as best as they can, especially as we're now into our four weeks to the day that we're into 2021, and by no means a normal set of circumstances. I am joined by a couple of colleagues later on in the call, but before we really pass over to those, I will be talking you through first of all an introduction to Man & Machine for those that are very new to Man & Machine and what we do and what we offer to our customers and join us for the first time. So I welcome you to the call. But also there's been quite a lot of Autodesk updates. So I'm going to be quite keen to talk through those off the back of Autodesk University that was late last year in November, and just bringing you up to speed and really what it means for you. There was a lot of talks, a lot of really good content there, but trying to break it down into palatable and really easy to digest information. That's what we're going to be talking through in the first half hour. As I say, I'll be joined on the call from 10:30 by two of my colleagues, Johnny Pye, Senior Applications Engineer, and our Technical Director, Robin Beals, to do a full technical overview of Revit in a BIM and digital workflow, looking at advanced features that, as you may have noticed earlier, talking about the Revit Model Checker, Uniclass, COBie, and also design collaboration, which is a huge part at the moment, given that everyone's working remotely. We will be open up for questions throughout, but we are aiming for a little time at the end to have questions or answer questions and give you feedback on anything you do raise. There is a question tab, so please, if there's anything you do see or do spot, drop us a message. There is quite a few of the team on the call today, so they will be able to answer those for you. And if we need to, we'll take them offline and we can get you in touch with the right account manager to really get those questions answered. As always, follow us on Instagram, on our LinkedIn page, on Twitter. We've got a lot of content coming out over the next few weeks and months, especially as some of the changes come into play, and also with newer versions of software. I know the engineers have been really key to get blogs, video content out to support you. They've done a really good job of it last year, and there's certainly more to come. So before we go any further, just a brief introduction for, like I say, the newer people on the call that aren't so familiar with Man & Machine. We are Autodesk's largest partner, throughout Europe, by a country mile. There is no one the size of us in Europe in terms of what we do and our level of partnership with Autodesk. What that really means for you is that we have really good specialisms with people like Johnny and Robin that are on the call, and many, many more engineers. They're able to support you in the different applications that you use. We also have our own software. A lot of it is more akin and relevant for the German and mainland Europe market, but we are steadily starting to see a few of these tools crop up, and we will bring, hopefully, although we had to delay it last year, bringing some of these applications into the UK later on this year, all things well. That said, we do have a vast array of different software vendors that have approached us to represent them exclusively, to support them, and really start to offer their applications into our customer base. A lot of this comes off the back of our the types of customers we tend to work with, but what that really offers to us is the ability to help you from conceptual design through to 2D and 3D detailed design, visualizations, collaboration, which is a big thing that I'll come back to about remote working later on in this presentation. But there's a whole vast array of different applications that take you end-to-end, conceptual design all the way through to facilities management and, I suppose, at the point of handover. This is really underpinned by all of the different working groups that we're fortunate to be involved in terms of the UK BIM Alliance, Building Smart. We've had an awful lot of changes happen, especially around Building Smart and the release of some of the ISO standards and the updates that have come out. They were very busy last year, and we've been actually very fortunate to assist our customers with aligning to those new set of documents. They're very, very important, given that we're now into an ISO stage and past the old level 2 and that BIM term now being discarded. we're helping our customers in that respect, and it really underpins what we're doing around the software side. Just finally about Man and Machine, just to give you a bit of an overview in terms of what we've been doing over the past 12 months. As I said earlier in the session, it's not been an easy time for anyone, both from a professional and personal point of view. It's been very, very tough and working remotely. We've been setting a lot of people up to actually continue to collaborate in projects, to actually get through 3 different lockdowns and being able to, as effectively and as efficiently, carry on with their projects and deliver against deadlines. Another area which we've seen a real drive from, especially since we've come back into 2021, is actually around the BIM and digital adoption programs we're running. We've seen a lot of businesses that potentially look to maybe park them for now last year and now starting to press ahead. And we've been able to help them from inception of creating a roadmap for an organisation to actually delivering a BIM digital strategy, updating documentation, common data environments, training, CAD standards, Revit standards, whatever it may be. We've been able to help, in some cases, really overhaul organisations and help them deliver what their clients are requiring, but also in some aspects just topping up where necessary in certain organisations, really being that kind of pillar to help them and to support them with driving the changes themselves. In terms of our software training, again, we've done an awful lot of training remotely. Robin and the rest of the team have done a really good, they've helped customers in terms of that remote working, and we are offering a platform that's probably a lot better than just actually screen shares, where we can start to push and pull with different environments, and you can start to really get to the crux of what it is that you need to learn, whether it's a change from 2D to 3D or whether it's actually more bespoke training to assist you with your workflow. We've been able to support in that respect. And then there's project support and delivery, and we were very fortunate again in terms of last year to actually deliver a few projects and help in terms of both from a BIM coordination point of view, BIM information managers, no matter I suppose what job, too small or big, we've been able to help and assist there and actually been a vital part of an organisation delivering their projects. So that's enough for Man and Machine. Let's talk about Autodesk University. It was the first session or the first university that was opened up for free and delivered virtually late last year in November. What came with it was 4 days of real good content, and it was good to see that Autodesk were really driving some of their products and programs forward. I know they've come under, in terms of its scrutiny with certain products, but it was great to see, especially from a partner point of view, that they're starting to now address some of these challenges with certain softwares, and they've really brought them on. And it's pleasing to see. One of the biggest announcements that we saw was really great to see was the acquisition of Spacemaker. It was announced on the first day of Autodesk University, which was great. And what Spacemaker does, it really starts to drive forward that next level of AI and generative design, where we really take a look in terms of urban planning or master planning, whether it's architecture, whether it's home builders, whether it could be a vast array of different things. But this is now actually starting to transition into a much easier to use platform that's available to the wider market. So reducing time to actually get, say, ideas or plan permissions put through, you can then come up with different designs and different options depending upon exactly what it is that you want to do. Are you looking for, say, in some of the instances shown on this video, to try to get as many flats or say maybe commercial buildings or commercial floor spaces into the design, you can start to actually tweak it and actually to bring it to exactly what it is you're looking to do and get an optimal design. So really condensing down the amount of time that's spent on doing this type of design, like I say, initial design internally or actually try and take it through to planning. This is something that, whilst it was announced in November, we are still waiting to hear more back from Autodesk in terms of timescales for when they're actually going to deliver it through to customers. And we probably anticipate that with all things, it's nice to see what's new and what's going on at Autodesk University. But we anticipate that for something probably to the middle part or later on in the year, where it's available to the wider market. As always, and as you are today, As soon as we get some information, I know there's a few engineers that are really excited about this tool. As soon as we hear more about it, we will be running separate events or a virtual event, more likely than not, to talk about SpaceMaker and actually bring it to I suppose our customers. Other areas that were discussed at Autodesk University, we had the introduction of Assemble, Plan Grid, and we've had these products for a little while, and there has been a lot of noise around these two, especially amongst our customers. We've seen quite a few people get on board with those. There was extra things that were brought into BIM 360, especially with Building Connected. But what we're now starting to see, and something that's actually going to be a massive change from Autodesk over the next couple of weeks, or as near as a couple of weeks' time, is the introduction of Autodesk Construction Cloud. This is a huge change, and I think that it's something that we've really been quite happy about. In the early part, when BIM 360 was brought in, there used to be a lot of different variants in terms of depending upon where you were on the project lifecycle. They're now starting to consolidate these tools. We're starting to see that the term BIM is being dropped, which is great. I think it was always used as a marketing spin in some respects. You need a certain platform to deliver a BIM project. We're starting to see it for what it is, which is great. And there's been some consolidation in there, which I'll talk about very shortly. What it really means is, in terms of what we're breaking down into, is certain pillars, really easy to see what you're subscribing to, and in terms of the functionality available. I am going to hand over to Robin in a second to just talk through some of the features that are available in different platforms. You will see that there's different names on here in terms of what you've traditionally been using, or if you are using certain BIM 360 applications, Assemble and Plan Grid. And there is more information to come, which we'll be talking about after the event, and I suppose with you directly, to what exactly it means for you, because there's a lot of benefits in here. I am going to hand over to Robin now, just to talk through the different variants of BIM Collaborate and Takeoff, also known as Quantify and Build.
Thanks, Nath. Can you mute yourself, Nath?
No problem.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'll come back in a bit more detail later with regards to my main slot this morning, but just to add on to what Nathan said there, lots of new bells and whistles coming out, so to speak, lots of new technology, which is great. Some of the functionality is very familiar. And whilst we've got all of this up on the screen, which is out in the public domain, obviously the software is not quite released yet. It's got a couple of weeks to go, so things might chop and change. But typically, if we start with BIM Collaborate, that's essentially the new name for Autodesk BIM 360 design, but it also includes at BIM Collaborate Pro level everything that was in BIM 360 Coordinate. So as well as your cloud-based work sharing inside of BIM 360 Docs, you also have your model coordination and online clash detection and issue management that you would have got inside of BIM 360 Coordinate. So that Autodesk BIM Collaborate Pro is a really fantastic platform that sits on Autodesk Docs as a data management platform, and then drives design collaboration through work sharing on the cloud in Revit, and then coordination with cloud-based clash detection as well. If we move on to Autodesk Takeoff, that's the quantification piece. Can you just go to the next slide, Nate? Thank you. That's the quantification piece. So we know a little bit less about that one at the moment, but that will come as the year continues. And this is offering your both 2D and 3D quantity takeoff, again, all driven through the cloud platform with Autodesk Docs underpinning it as a document management suite with insights controlling your dashboards and reports. I guess Autodesk Build is the flagship one in the collection of products, if you like. And this is essentially taking the acquisition from PlanGrid and then implementing that with some of the most loved features from BIM 360 Build. Again, time is still young with the product. It's not quite out yet, so things may chop and change. But typically, you're looking at the best of both worlds with both PlanGrid functionality and Autodesk BIM 360 Build functionality to offer you project management with RFIs and submittals, cost management with payment applications and forecasting, quality control with your checklists, your QC lists. And there's so many nice ways of doing those now. I can't go into a lot of detail due to NDA, but it's made everything from initial setup due to alignment with your internal best practices a lot easier with this new unified platform. So those are the initial products. We still have BIM 360 Ops, which sits in there as well, but typically we have a much more concise or refined set of products to take you through that construction workflow.
Thank you very much, Robin, for a brief overview. And like I say, there is more to follow in the next few weeks. And as we have the information released from Autodesk of exactly how that sits. As I said at the start of the session, the team will be doing a lot of different webinars and blogs and information to come out. So if there is certain elements that you want to pick up with us about, by all means, drop us a message through the chat. We can take that away, and by all means, we can look to pick up with you specifically to really dig that or to, I suppose, go further into what exactly it means for you. But as we can see, in terms of the offerings that are available on the Autodesk Construction Cloud, we are moving from a point of design, which we've been able to do for it, or we have previously been able to do in different applications, the planning side, build, but now into actually operational side as well. And as I say, there is more to follow in that respect. So what does it really mean briefly if you're using some of these applications? Well, Robin's sort of hinted at that already. So in terms of if you're using BIM 360 Design at this moment in time, you will have the ability to transfer and move into BIM 360, BIM Collaborate Pro. That is at no additional cost to you at all. And what it will mean is Autodesk will actually be including BIM 360 Coordinate. So in terms of that model validation side, completely free of charge. So BIM 360 Design, you'll be able to migrate through to BIM Collaborate Pro and actually have all the bells and whistles at no extra charge of BIM 360 Coordinate, which is a nice touch. And it's something that's good to see from Autodesk that are able to assist you and actually both consolidating the tools but giving you added functionality and at no extra cost. In terms of BIM 360 builds, simply Autodesk builds, we're dropping the BIM 360 tag. It is going to have some functionality brought into it from PlanGrid. I know there's a few PlanGrid customers that we do have, and there's people that are looking at that application at the moment. And given what we know now, I would certainly say that to hold fire and pick up with your account manager and talk about Autodesk Build in the coming couple of weeks. Like I say, this will be superseding BIM 360 Build and having the added functionality of PlanGrid. And there's a new interface, a new mobile app, which we're quite keen to, or we quite like the look of from having early demonstrations with the Autodesk team. In terms of BIM 360 docs, Autodesk docs, I will come on to Autodesk docs in a bit more detail in a later slide. But again, just dropping the BIM 360 tagline, Autodesk docs carries almost all of the functionality as it did before in BIM 360. The added benefit of this, and this is the one where most of our customers tend to have BIM 360 doc subscriptions with working remotely. If you have Autodesk docs or you subscribe to Autodesk docs, you will be able to plug into BIM 360 docs, likewise into any other Autodesk Construction Cloud platform. So there will be, you will have the potential and you will have the ability to plug into the different variants that either internal teams are using or your current subscriptions that allow you to. So overall, what does Autodesk Construction Cloud really mean for us? Well, there's a really, really big shift in terms of the earlier applications that are used in terms of design collaboration and also remote working. We now move to a bring your own subscription model, which is great, both from a point of view of actually working on a project, but then again, just collaborating with people outside of your organization. Gone are the times of actually having to purchase licenses and then add them or give a license or an application or entitlement to someone outside of your organization. Likewise, if you are being invited to a project, you can bring your current subscription and bolt into their project. So you can be invited in and use your own subscription to have all the entitlements. As before, permissions will need to be set, so in terms of what you can see, but like I said, that's a smaller detail which we can take offline and we can talk to you about following the call. Autodesk Construction Cloud goes live in a couple of weeks, 9th of February 2021. that is the date that all of what we're talking about here will become available. And there's a big thing that I'm about to mention in a second that comes live on the 9th of February. What we've seen at the moment is a simplified interface. Robin and Johnny will highlight just how much I think they feel that the improvement is the interface and the usability of the applications. And we've just seen a more slicker feel to what Autodesk have done with their Construction Cloud offerings. And I suppose the final point, there's also added entitlements in your current agreements. As I mentioned with BIM 360 Design, you can upgrade to Collaborate Pro right away and get all the functionality of Coordinate. However, one big change is the current entitlements within the AC collection. As you all probably know on the call, and I know a lot of the people that register for the call are typically using either the AC collection or products in there. Your Revits, your Civil 3Ds, your 2D design in AutoCAD, Navisworks, you name it. The whole kit bag is available in the AC collection. From the 9th of February, Autodesk have announced that anyone that has an AC collection will have access to Autodesk Docs. That will be an entitlement available in your products and services option in your account, and you'll have the ability to start using Autodesk Docs with your AC collection, which is great. And I think given the work where we are at the moment, given the news that's happened or is around at the moment in terms of remote working and staying at home and having to be away from the office and your teams, this is a nice extra addition at no extra cost. It will just be made available to active subscriptions, new subscriptions. It'll be available there for you right away. So what does it mean if I have Autodesk Revit? We've got a lot of people that say are using single products and are just using Revit, for instance. And now you see this and you're thinking, well, there's an awful lot of tools in the AC collection. I was thinking about it before, but with the Autodesk Docs entitlement, maybe potentially instead of spending money on another form of document transfer or another cloud platform, you want to move through to the AC collection. Well, how do you do that? If you're currently subscribed into Revit, you can either wait for your subscription to end and just go for a new AC collection. If you're within 30 days of your current agreement ending, there is a path that Man Machine can help you with actually getting onto AC collections a little sooner. But you can actually upgrade mid-term. You can pay the difference between, say, when your contract ends or your agreement ends, and only you'll pay the difference between what Revit is to the AC collection. For those of you that are on the call that know the differences or have been looking at this, it's roughly what a BIM 360 Docs license is, and in some respects less. You can actually get it for, say, a cost less than Revit and BIM 360 Docs, or now to be Autodesk Docs. And it means that you can transition to the AC collection, you get all of the tools available in that bundle of software, and you're able to collaborate and work remotely. With other products, so other single products, your AutoCADs, Navisworks, 3ds Max, Civils, there's other tools in there. The jump is a little bit more steep. But as you've seen, by moving to the AC collection, you have Docs, and also you have all the other tools in the kit bag. And the same applies. You are able to upgrade or change earlier than your renewals due or at the point of renewal. So again, we've already started to see this. There's been a few customers that are moving to the AC collection, down to the fact that they can then work remotely, can work with other project teams and other clients or whoever it may be, other contractors, at little to no extra cost. And I think the big thing here in terms of what we've been finding with our customers is, when was the last time you really looked at what's available in the AC collection in your current workflow? Given the year that we've had, efficiency is key. Delivery of projects and doing it within a decent time frame and using all of the applications or software available to you, now's the time to look at it. And we've already embarked on the last 4 weeks, or these last few weeks into January, of actually helping our customers. And it's been really, really important for them to really understand what is available to them and just make sure as effective a solution as possible. There was a lot of firefighting last year to get people set up remotely and working and whatnot. and we've been able to help them. So how do you do it? Well, Man and Machine have been offering their AEC upgrade pack in terms of an allotted amount of time with an engineer to understand and sit down with you for, say, a morning, for you to look at what you're doing at the moment, look at where you're trying to get to from a software point of view, and actually put a plan in place and leverage some of the applications available to you at very little extra cost. So there's things that we're doing, and what it really means is we can actually start to say, show products like Navisworks that you might not have been using before. We might show you things like InfluWorks and how that's come on leaps and bounds since it's really, well, I think the last year it's really come on a hell of a lot, and we've seen customers really start to take the task with it. So there are things that we're doing that can help support you, and we're conscious of what's going on at the moment. So there are things that we can help you, and it's worth talking to your account manager about what that means for you. Finally, just before I hand over to Johnny and to Robin, there's just a couple of extra bits I just want to talk about. So one of them is premium plans, and I know we've got quite a few customers on the phone, on the call that have been asking about what are premium plans, what do they mean for me, how do I leverage it, is it right, or I want to use it. It allows for single sign-on, it allows for reporting with user details, and also, especially with or with Brexit, actually extra territory rights. If you have people outside of the UK not having to purchase from a local reseller or partner of Autodesk, they're able to actually carry on, and you can manage it from, I suppose, the central office or from the main headquarters. How to upgrade to premium plan? There are a couple of caveats in there. There needs to be minimum 50 seats to upgrade, so I would certainly suggest speaking to your account manager for more information on this. A couple other bits and pieces before I go, just to look at, so key dates for 2021 around the Autodesk side in particular. There are the maintenance side going end of life. It's on the 6th of May, we've got a couple of important points. Any maintenance customers out there, which I don't think there's many left now, it's been retired on the 7th of May this year, and also doing the trading offers, the M2S, you need to get in ahead of the 6th of May. So please pick up with your account managers. Please leverage them, because we're finding that a lot of people who haven't worked Man and Machine haven't necessarily had all of the information at disposal to make informed decisions. The only other thing to mention, just in terms of if you move from perpetual to subscription, the maintenance to subscription switch, there is a price change happening on the 7th of May. If you have a renewal round, then please speak to your account manager and get in ahead of this. And all maintenance to subscription licenses, as before, do have the 2028 guarantee as usual. So speak to your account managers. There's key dates there for you. Please take them away, and please pick up with us. But at this point, I am going to hand over to Johnny and Robin. Thank you for listening this morning. I hope you enjoy the technical session that we have planned. By all means, please get your questions in. There's a lot of people on the phones picking up the messages on the webinar to be able to deal with any questions or queries you have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nathan. So yeah, we're going to be looking at, we're going to be demonstrating some of what we've been talking about. The key really for what I want to focus on during this is, like Nathan's already said, efficiency. We're going to be looking at this in the context of the Revit and a BIM and digital workflow. So I'll make some references to things like the new ISO standards and things like that. But let me introduce myself just quickly first, and I will quickly put this away. So just a little bit about myself before we start. I've always found that these kind of remote and webinar type sessions are quite difficult to get to know everybody and for everybody to get to know you, kind of thing. My background has been in structural and civil engineering. I'm sure we all have hobbies that we really miss. I certainly do. One thing that has come out of this lockdown has been a great little puppy that I've got. His eyes would melt bar, but he also manages to chew everything. I haven't got any pictures of some of the stuff he's done, but I'm sure everybody has their lockdown thing that they've done. So that's a bit about myself. Like I say, it's just really because sometimes through this kind of working from home, it's been difficult to get to know people. What we're going to be looking at today, just going through the agenda, this PowerPoint isn't going to be very long. Nathan's done most of the legwork in terms of presenting new things to everybody and things like that. So I'm going to get into the demo fairly quickly. The agenda, first of all, is going to be going through Revit. It's going to be a fairly high level, but it's going to be for people who maybe have used Revit or people who have never used Revit. It will be a demonstration of some techniques inside of Revit and some of the reasons why Revit is a really great product for efficiency and consistency and things like that. That'll take about 30 minutes. Each one of these sections is going to take about 30 minutes apiece. We'll take a 10-minute break after that because we've been going for about an hour. And then we'll reconvene and we're going to look at some add-ons. So I'll go into a bit of detail about what each of these sort of sections, but we'll be covering things like Dynamo and some really good free add-ins. And then last of all, myself and Robin are actually going to be running through an entire workflow using BIM 360 from coordinate to design. So that's finding a clash and actually bringing that into Revit. And then we'll have a quick Q&A. So like I say, just breaking those down into sort of their key constituents. In the Revit 101, I'm going to focus on why it's a really good idea to have a model. I'll be doing this in a demo, so I'll be going through key features, like I say, of Revit, where you can really drive efficiency. That's going to include things like schedules. So key part of Revit is the way that it deals with data. And I'll show you some kind of techniques as well that you can use when you're modeling, and just give some kind of anecdotal stories about maybe ideas for templates and things like that. And we'll also look at sheets. The reason we're going to have a look at sheets is because of the ISO standards and naming conventions and things like that. And some of the ways that new platforms online are actually using sheets, whether it's an OCR scanner to be able to pull the information off the sheets. That just means that there might be ways that you can format the sheets that might be better or worse for that OCR scanner to work. So once you've gone through the sort of the Revit basics, if you like, for anybody who has or hasn't used Revit, we'll look at the kind of more detailed things that you can do with add-ons in Revit, because there is an absolute plethora of add-ons in Revit which can do very specific and efficient things. The first one, which I'm sure everyone will have heard of, will be Dynamo. I'm going to go through 3 scripts really to demonstrate applications for it. They're not the most complicated scripts, and I will actually show the guts of the script, but I'm also going to show you how you could deploy something like Dynamo internally so that you don't need people to learn very intricate things about the way it works. You could have one person who knows very well and everybody else can just use it as a push button type affair. We'll then look at some third-party add-ons. So there's some really good third-party add-ons, which I implore you, if you already have Revit, to use. And if you don't have Revit, you'll see how good they are. 2 of them are free and 1 of them is going to be paid for in terms of the add-ons that we look at. There are plenty more. They're just the ones that I think last year I used more than any other, and I think are great as they are. Rob's then going to do a demo on the interoperability tools inside of Revit. And this is going to be mainly focused around the COBie data. There's also going to be a bit on the IFC exchange formats as well in there. There is a bit that ties back to Dynamo in some of the ways that the interoperability tools work, but I'll leave all of that explanation up to Rob and how to use, just to say that they are a suite of tools from Autodesk, which are free. You can download and install them, and there's 4 of them. And so we'll only be looking at 2, but all of them are in their own right, have very useful functionality. And then, like I say, last of all, we're going to be looking at a workflow in BIM 360. So we will be doing this live. The model I'm actually going to be working on is cloud hosted. I have done plenty of testing to make sure it works with the webinar, so I hope there's going to be no kind of lag with this. But we'll be doing a workflow from BIM 360 Coordinate, where we find a clash automatically. So BIM 360 Coordinate is going to do the legwork in finding hard clashes. Perhaps maybe where you'd be looking at spell checking models, making sure there's no really expensive clashes, which are going to be problems. And then be pushing that through actually into Revit for Rob to be able to pick up and fix, and then push back into BIM 360. So Nathan's already talked about some of the cloud services which are coming out. all of this functionality should be available at some point through that new interface. But we're doing this on BIM 360 because we have BIM 360 and it works very well. So just a few things about why I'm excited for 2021. I kind of wanted to do this really just to talk about some things which, three things which I think are going to be good for 2021 because we all need something to look forward to. The first is the new offerings from the cloud services from Autodesk. It's always great to have new stuff. I think that the new services and the way that they interconnect, from what I've seen, it looks like it's going to be something very special. And at a time when everybody needs to be, everybody's kind of maybe working all over the place. I've had calls with people from Portugal, Turkey, kind of all over the place. And maybe more than I would have before. And they've been using sort of cloud services to do these type of things. And so having more cloud services and better cloud services is always a good thing. The other thing I am quite excited about is the updates to Revit that are coming out. Last year or maybe the year before, there was the open letter that was sent out. And there was never going to be an instant change. It was a bit, I suppose, like a ship heading towards an iceberg for a bit. But I think that the development from what was instigated by that call to action is going to be realized in this year. So that's just something that I'm quite excited about. If you follow the beta releases of Revit, which you can publicly do, you'll know some of the updates that I might be talking about. And then last of all, really is efficiency. This year, we might be needing to do more with less than we have done before for various reasons. But in any case, efficiency is always something that we want. We want to be able to maybe do more design work and spend less time doing monotonous work. That is a key part of what I see efficiency being. So the three things I'm excited about this year, like I say, 2021 can really only get better, to be honest. So I will, on that note, jump into the demo. We're going to be looking at this model here. It's a small dormitory project, but everything I'm going to show you is scalable. So I'll comment as to what I mean by that, but we're looking at a 2-story building. We could be looking at a 20-story building. In fact, if you are looking at 20-story buildings, some of the things I do are going to be very much more efficient just because you have you're going to have those extra stories to work with, kind of thing. So I'm going to jump into Revit. I'm going to see if I can come out of this PowerPoint majestically and head to Revit. So that wasn't too bad. So like I say, I'm in Revit now. Hopefully that transition wasn't so quick that anyone missed it, but this is the model that we're going to be working with. This is actually a render that's rendered into Revit. And this brings me on to my first point that we were talking about in Revit 101 from the agenda. Having a model is going to allow you to visualize things a lot better. If I had a 2D drawing, I guess maybe some of the ways that companies might work is they subcontract the model making and they'll get renders back. But having the model allows me to use countless amounts of plugins inside of Revit and Revit itself to actually create these quite stunning visualizations. And just to really, this is actually created in an application called Enscape. So this isn't Revit itself, but in 2021, which is what I'm using here, there is some pretty impressive new capabilities in terms of how you can see the 3D model. So if I head to perhaps one of my 3D views that I have, I'll do this just up here. So we've got a general view. This is just the model as it is. And what I'm going to do, just really to show you some of the new capabilities in terms of Revit 2021 and how it works with ambient occlusions and things like that. I've got a view template set up to be able to just quickly change this to a rendered appearance. So I'm just going to do that. I take a second because it's going to have to switch to the rendered version of what the shaders look like on this. But this is the first part of what we're really talking about when we're talking about having the model in Revit, having a 3D version of something to be able to do something. I can take this to a customer, I can show them this, and they can come up with ideas and changes that they might want to to include in this, just based on the fact that I have the model. So I'm going to carry on the theme of having the model for a little bit. So if you do have the model, obviously it makes it a lot easier to create 3D views from this. So for instance, sections. If I'm using AutoCAD, I have to redraw a section, perhaps, if I'm going to want to take a section through one of these areas. And I've got to figure out what it is that I'm going to include in that section. But by having the 3D model in here, I can just take a section straight through my building. And I could change the direction of that. I can choose how deep I want that section. And I can go to that section. And I can see something which is going to work for a sort of base for me to actually start maybe adding things to. And I know that because I've taken a slice through the model, there is no way that there's going to be any discrepancies between the widths or the heights in terms of what I'm looking at. So other little benefits as well of having a 3D model, and these are going to be sort of maybe a bit more advanced, is maybe things like adding analytical loads, things you can do with taking this model through into Robot perhaps and doing structural calculations. You could run solar analysis inside of Revit. The big one for me really is coordination. If you've got the model, this would be something maybe if you just started using Revit, you can work with other companies who are using Revit and you can start coordinating. So you can start making sure that the pipe work that's going through the wall is going through in the correct place, or that things aren't clashing, lights aren't clashing with ducts and things like that. So that's really the key part of having a model. One of the other parts that we're going to look at as well is the way that views work inside of Revit. I'm going to quickly run through a couple of really key functions inside of Revit that allow you to quickly get a consistent view out. And so I've got these three GA general kind of plans of my model here. And what I want to do is perhaps be able to create the furniture layout and maybe a room layout and do that quickly and consistently. So if I do that naturally, I can duplicate this view. Everyone may have done this before inside of Revit. And I could rename this perhaps ground floor FF&E. Now, when we get to the add-ons, I'm going to be showing you very, very quick ways of being able to do what I'm just about to do now. But if you just, if you take anything away from what I'm about to do, it's going to be the use of view templates. So with this new view that I have, like I say, I want to include the furniture in here. And inside of Revit, I've got all of the different categories set up. I'm not actually going to be doing any modeling today. I'm really just going to be demonstrating some of the key efficiencies inside of Revit. But one of the things that you can use is what's called a view template to save all the settings. And so I can just click on my view templates in my settings here to change this. I can choose my view template that relates to my FF&E. I can choose OK. And that's actually going to then change all the settings so that I have everything just ready to go. All of my furniture has appeared because I've modeled it in the background. And one of the other really useful things that I've set this view template to do is actually move that view underneath FF&E under my project browser. So organizing quite nicely in there as well. And then what I would do is I do the same thing for the first floor. I can duplicate this. I could duplicate with detailing, rename it FF&E, and I can do the same thing. And the reason I'm going to do this twice, I know it's a bit repetitive to show you how I'm doing this twice, but the reason for that is because what I've done with these two views now, and if you imagine maybe this was a 20-story building and they all had these view templates, the same view template against them, and for some reason I don't want to be able to see the furniture. Let's just, for example, say the furniture. What I can do, because I'm using a view template, is if I edit the view template, and you can see here I have two views, which are these ones that are tied to this view template. I can change anything in this view template, and whatever I change in terms of settings in this view template is going to update across the board. It's going to mean that every single view I have will do the same thing. And so if you build a Revit template and you have these view templates set up, you can have very, very consistent drawings. You're always going to have designers outputting the same views with the same things in them. So that's a really, really key function inside of Revit for consistency. The next little thing I'm going to show you is the use of scope boxes. This is really something, I guess, that's absolute necessity when you're creating drawings, and that's to be able to crop the views in exactly the same way at every level. It's very easy to do. I have actually got a scope box here. I'm not going to go into exactly how to do it, but just know that they are extremely key in making consistently cropped views. So if I wanted to crop just these two views, I can choose the scope box that I already have, and I can just crop this down to this view. And I'm starting to now get a lot of consistency for the drawings that I have. And I can change those on the fly as well if I need to. So as well as being useful for consistency and driving consistency throughout your drawing, you can also use these for checking. So one of the things that this might be really useful for these view templates is maybe checking for information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to a 3D view and just duplicate this 3D view. And I've got a view template set up that's going to allow me to check for a piece of information. It's going to allow me to check for the fire doors in this project. So I'm going to call this 3D fire doors. So what I want to do as a designer is I want to make sure that this design has the correct fire doors in. It's got the, or at least I think they're going to be in the right place. I want to just know where they are and that there are some, and that's going to be based on a piece of information. So with this 3D view, what I can do is I can change my view template here to check for fire doors, click OK, and I've set this up so that what it does is it looks for a piece of information in here with fire in it, and it shows me where those fire doors are. Now in a bigger building, I could just split the floors up so that I use this 3D template to find specific things, but this is an example of how this could be used. This could be used for anything. This could be used for finding information that's missing. So for instance, Uniclass is really, really important parameter to have in some projects. You could create a view template that just highlights everything that does not have the that classification actually in the object. When we get to schedules, you could obviously use schedules to do that, but if there's anything you need to visualize that's based on design, so fire doors is a good one, you kind of need to know exactly where the fire doors are and kind of how to get out and things like that. Then view templates are something that out of the box, Revit just as it is can give you that kind of checking ability to do. And the way this is built, and I'll just quickly show you this so that you can kind of get a feel for what I've done in this case, is I've used filters. So this is for anybody who's using perhaps Revit. I'm going a little bit in depth here. I'm using filters to get a specific parameter that has fire doors. It's coloring those red. And what this view template does is it sets everything else to a transparent color so that I can see the rest of the model or anything that isn't important to me in a transparent way. And I can see everything else, all of the fire doors, anything with that specific parameter against it in red. It's like I say, there could be multiple applications for this. And the other thing as well is once you start getting into a project, you actually start getting a lot of links. This is one of the more kind of, I suppose, annoying things about coordination in some respects. You start adding links to your Revit model and things get a bit messy. And this is where all the things I've already talked about have come in. Once you have a view template set up, this is very easy to tidy up, to crop and also to tidy up. So I can add my scope box. And the scope boxes don't just work in plan. You can also set the scope box to work in elevation. And then I've also got a view template here to tidy up this elevation. And that's going to mean that all of the mess that's in there is going to disappear. If anybody on this call uses Enscape, they'll know that the assets you get with them are all set to planting. And so this can be a really neat way to make sure that all of your views do not have that particular category in it of planting perhaps. And I've got rid of all those extra levels. I've just got the levels that I want. So really, really efficient in terms of being quick and also consistent. It's going to mean that all my views look exactly the same. So that's about views and that's about the model. Like I say, there's lots and lots of different things that are going to be coming out. Some things that I will very quickly talk about is maybe a bit more detail. So when you are creating the 3D view, we haven't been looking at maybe how you add the mortar or wall ties or things like that. And that is something that's very easy to do in Revit using the detail components. And when we get to Dynamo, I can kind of comment as to how you could automate these things. If anybody spent a lot of time adding detail components and things like that, it is something that perhaps Dynamo could help you with. So that pretty much covers off views. I'm running a little bit over time in terms of what I spent on views. What I'm going to do now is look at schedules. And again, anybody who uses Revit will know how schedules work. You'll know exactly kind of what they do. But one of the best ways to drive efficiency in Revit is to have your schedules built in the template that everybody uses. What that's going to mean is that as people model in Revit, the schedules are just going to build themselves. As you put a door in, it's going to add it to the schedule, and however you set that schedule up is going to allow you to view the information just as it happens, and not only view it as it happens, but also actually change it from the schedule. So for instance, if you have perhaps a door that you need to change a piece of information for, so for example, at the end here, I've got some remarks, I can type in to this particular door here, I can type in fire here, and that's actually going to update the model as well. The way I kind of like to look at a Revit model is that in reality, it is a glorified Excel spreadsheet in the form of a building. It just makes it easier to find things and see things because it's in that format, but behind it, it is technically an Excel spreadsheet as well. And then if I want to see where this specifically is in the model, I've got the option from the schedule to highlight a model, where it's going to say there's none open, and it's going to do its best just to give me a view with that door in it. So it's this door here. And that's really kind of key to making sure that you have one and the other. And so I can have both open at the same time. I can review the information I've got here, and just really to highlight the fact that when I change one, it changes the other. If I click on this door here, and I change the comments here to acoustic, we're going to get that information updated in the schedule as well. And if I'm using tags to tag that particular comment, all of it's going to update at exactly the same time. It's all linked. And on the topic of tagging as well, one of the things that I had in one of my first views is actually nothing was tagged in here. I've got a bunch of rooms that have already been modeled. And if I wanted to tag things very quickly, again, probably useful for anybody who's using Revit, perhaps in this case, but I can head to annotate, and I've got the option to tag all. And I want to tag the doors, the rooms, and the windows in this case. And this is very easy to do. I can choose the rooms, make sure I choose the right tag. I can have as many tags as I want. I can pull any of the information I've got here out, choose number and area. I'm going to choose my window tags. I'll go with the type mark, and I'll go with my doors, and I'll choose the type mark as well. And that's going to tag everything for me. And it's very easy to change tags as well. So if I didn't want to have that area number at the bottom in there, in Revit, I can just select all of them, and I can just choose to have maybe just the name if I want to as well. And what Revit does is it centers that tag. So all of these have appeared in a certain place. If I did need to move them all at the same time, again, I could select them all, and I could move them very slightly, perhaps depending on where I want to move them to. But very quick if I need to tag things. I'm going to show you ways that you can speed up things like dimensioning when we get to Dynamo as well. So I brought things around from schedules back to the model and how you can work with annotation and things like that in there as well. What we're going to look at now is sheets. I'm going to focus on sheets for the last part of this demonstration. Really discussing kind of the way that this sheet is or the sheet in here is actually set up, and how you would actually bring a view through onto a sheet as well. So one of the things to note about the way that all of my browser is set up is that it's organized in a way that I would like it set up. Not necessarily on all projects going to be or the way all companies want it set up, but you can organize this however you want based on any of the information in there. And on very large projects, that is key to making sure that people can find things very quickly. And I'm going to add my A1 frame here, and that's going to create the sheet for me. Now, again, this goes back to the template. If in the template you have these sheets for your company in here, anybody is going to have the same title blocks to use. And the way that this title block is set up, or the way that I've set this one up, this is really just not necessarily the way I would do this in practice, but really to kind of show you what you can do, is using the ISO naming convention here. I've created separate blocks, which is what some people like to do, but I've also created a name down the bottom here that is the full length. And this goes back to the OCR scanning that I was mentioning earlier. If you have an OCR scanner where you need to get these out individually, and these names may vary in length, then it's wise to have a box system like this. If the name is always going to be based on the length of the or the full name and number, then you could have this down here. By having both, you actually curtail the kind of like distinction between the two, and it gives anybody who has an OCR scanner the option to either go for the full name or go for the individual elements of information. And that's really just a forward thought. There's always a variable that comes up that means something doesn't work, but this gets around both of those. And if I fill in any of the information in here, so if I was to fill in the volume or any of the information that's in here, you will see that it fills in wherever those things appear. And this number would just slowly fill in. What I'm actually going to do when we get to the add-ins is I'm going to show you how you could use Dynamo and an Excel sheet with potentially a task information delivery plan, so literally a list of your drawings, to actually create the sheets for you automatically and fill all of this information in automatically as well. Of course, if all the projects you have, you're going to have the same named sheets or the same number on the sheets, what I would do is I would just make sure in the template I have all of those sheets set up. We'd be very lucky if every project had the same amount of levels in it, the same kind of areas in it, etc. So being able to flip on a dime and be able to actually pull in the sheets from an Excel sheet is probably the way that we might want to work, or was going to give us that flexibility and efficiency. I'll just get rid of this sheet, and I'm going to it's come up to the half an hour now, and what I've done there is I've gone through the benefits of having a model. I've shown you what, if you do use Revit, perhaps you can use a few templates, some key efficiencies in there, and everything I've shown you is out of the box. Nothing I have done in this first section has used an add-in or anything special. I would say that the view of the 3D model that we had is something that 2021 is known for now. So if you go into an earlier version, you might not find that. But otherwise, everything I've shown you has been in Revit from sort of, well, at least for the last sort of 3 or 4 years. So we'll take a 10-minute break now. And we'll come back in 10 minutes to pick up on the Revit add-in side of things. So it's going to be the Dynamo, the third-party plugins, and also Rob's demonstration of the interoperability tools. So I hope that's been useful for anybody. Like I say, we'll take that 10-minute break. We're going to flip to a break scheme for the 10 minutes. So if you get a coffee, etc. Hello and welcome back. I hope everyone had enough time to get coffee, etc. In this second part, we're going to be looking at the add-ins inside of Revit. So the first part, as I mentioned, is going to be Dynamo. I imagine everybody's heard of Dynamo. It's been a bit of a buzzword for quite a while now. And it actually installs now with, I think from Revit 2020, it installs with Revit. So the idea is this is only going to keep on being developed. The where you can find Dynamo, if you would like to use it, is in the Manage tab on the furthest right end. If you're using earlier versions than Revit 2020, you can install it. So it's just a quick Google of Dynamo install, and you'll be able to install that on earlier versions. What I'm going to show you is using Dynamo 2.0, but these could be used all the way back to probably 2014, as long as they're tweaked a little bit, some of the scripts I'm going to be using. But the applications are going to be exactly the same. So for anybody who doesn't know Dynamo too well, it's a visual scripter. It's something that allows you to essentially create your own functions inside of Revit and then do things with those functions. So it doesn't look anything like Revit, and the way I'm actually going to run this is going to be from the Dynamo player. So this point of view that we're looking at what I'm about to demonstrate would be from the point of view of somebody who maybe doesn't know Dynamo at all. They just need to click play on a function that maybe I've created in the background that's going to allow them to do something. So this is what Dynamo Player looks like. It's very, very simple interface. The way that it works is the scripts are created by somebody else, and then you point the scripts. So you choose a folder where the scripts are sitting. You don't need to do this every time. You just need to do this for the first sort of setup. So just quickly add this in here. And that's then going to give you all of the scripts in that folder. Ooh, I've punched out somewhere. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the scripts I'm going to be running through specifically are adding grid dimensions automatically, highlighting based on a search, and that's a search of every single parameter in any of the model elements, importing sheets from an Excel so that I can get that ISO standards in there, and one that you actually get out of the box, which is the update sheet names to uppercase in Revit. And these are customizable. Hopefully what you'll see here is ideas rather than exact demonstrations. So ideas for things that you do on a daily basis, which take you forever, and you want to automate those things. That's the kind of thing Dynamo can do. Anything that you spend hours copying and pasting, or anything monotonous, essentially, is what this is for. So the first one here is grid dimensions. Very simple script. These aren't fully developed scripts. They could be much, much more complicated and do much more, but they really just highlight some of the things that you can do. So in here, perhaps I've got a bigger project. I want to dimension all of these grids. What I can do with this particular script is, and this is to show you kind of the way that the interface here works, is choose the view I want to use. So I'm on the GA ground floor FF&E. So if I choose the GA ground FF&E view and hit play, what it should do is just pop all those dimensions in there for me. Now, if you think about this, this could be used for other things as well. If you've got lighting layouts or things like that, things that take you kind of ages to click on each little bit, you could set this up to dimension based on category or things like that as well. And I've saved myself a little bit of time there. And you imagine you add all of this little bit of time savings up, and over a year, you've got a lot of time savings. So the next one I'm going to demonstrate is the highlight based on a search. Now, this one's kind of interesting. The way that this script particularly works is that you can search for anything based on a category, but you could do whatever you want with the script. You could get things to look a certain way based on what I'm doing here. So in this example, what I will do is I'll choose doors because we were using doors earlier. So this is a nice kind of intro into how this works. And maybe what you're looking for is a value. Maybe what you need to find in this model is something that you know the name of, but you have no idea where it is. Or you need to check whether it's the things that are supposed to be there are in there. So for example, if I just search for fire, which is one of the properties I look for with the doors, what this script is going to do is it's going to look at all the doors in the project. It's going to read every single parameter, instance and type based in the project. And then it's going to isolate anything with fire as a value in those parameters. And then it's going to give you where that particular piece of information actually is. So it's picked up a lot in terms of the fire rating from the actual type class here as well. So if I was maybe looking for interior, something like that, I could type interior. I've made this so it doesn't really matter about the whether it's capitalized or not. And I can see here that obviously all these doors have the function of interior, and I can type exterior. and it'll find those as well. But all this is doing is it's searching for, because I had the isolation thing on, it didn't find it. But any piece of information against any category, I could just search for it and find it with this script. But this script could be kind of put into any application where you're looking for something or you want to be able to see something in the design. The next one is going to be to do with sheets. So this is going to mean that I just have to quickly flick to Excel to show you what this looks like. And this could look like perhaps task information delivery plan or just a list of information that you get. So I've got here the information that I was inputting manually earlier. And if I had this sheet, if this was something that's created before the project was started so that I could utilize this information, then I could use the script I've created here to map this into Revit. So just to prove that I haven't already got these sheets, if I go down to my sheets here, I only have one sheet so far as my front page. The way that this one works is I need to find the actual Excel sheet. So you can imagine maybe you've got this project, you just need to go to the Excel. I've got it open. Choose my drawing names here. Make sure you've got the correct sheet name. You could automate this. You could get this to be a drop down or something that allows you just to choose the right one. And then when you've got the Excel sheet in there, it's just to hit play, and that should create all of those sheets. Depending on how many you've got, it might take more or less time. But now we can see if we just go into here, all of that information. Got into naming. If I go into here, I've got all of that information that's been mapped straight across from the Excel. So saves you loads of time, and it just means that then as well, if you need to make changes or anything like that, you could just map the information straight from Excel. So really time-saving script there. And the last one is, like I say, something out of the box. So if anybody wants to go and just quickly have a look at this, you can. You've got the option to update all of the sheet names to uppercase if you ever need to. Kind of a simple one there. So that's Dynamo. Like I say, very quickly looking at perhaps one of these scripts. You can actually change these live in this Dynamo player here, so you can kind of tweak them as you go. But really simple interface. And like I say, this is how you would implement this in practice. You would use this Dynamo player to make things very simple for anybody using it. And in the background, the script, the grid dimensioning script just looks like this. So I'm not going to explain it, or I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but it's essentially using the grids, finding intersections with the grids, and then it's putting the dimension at I'm using the crop to where to put the dimension in there. But you imagine you could use any category. You could be choosing the elements you want to dimension, deciding whether that's vertical or horizontal, and yeah, maybe saving a bit of time doing it that way. So I'm going to close that down. So that's Dynamo. The Dynamo player is something that just comes with it. And this is really just the interface, like I say, to allow everybody in the company to use the scripts that are created rather than having to learn Dynamo itself. So what I'm going to do now that I've shown you Dynamo is jump into some of the add-ins that we have. I'm going to do this fairly quickly because we're a little bit tight on time. I don't want to step on Rob's toes here. So the first one I'm going to use is the align tool. And this is really useful if you've got anything that you need to align. So I'm just turning my furniture back on because I'm actually just going to put some furniture in this room here. And so you can get to these add-ons by just Googling Revit add-ins. And this one is called Align. Like I say, anybody who's used Revit might have come across this one before. So the way it works, and you can use, I've actually found this works on views. This Align tool works on an astounding amount of objects inside of Revit, not just the objects that I'm about to show you. So if you imagine maybe, I'm not being too pernickety about where I'm laying these things out, just grab them. I've got a little tool here that's been installed, this Align tool, and this is going to allow me to align these so I can align them to the top. I can then distribute horizontally, and that will make them all laid out nicely. But like I say, if you've got like a lighting layout, or perhaps you've got air terminals or something that repeats, then that's something that could be really, really useful. The next tool I'm going to look at is one called Tiny Tools. from Archlizer. So before I was having to copy these views one by one. What I could do is if I wanted my, let's say my floor finishes done very quickly, I could select my general layouts here. I won't choose my roof, but you could imagine I had 20 stories. I'll select both of these. I can choose the option to duplicate the views, grab these views, and these are exactly the same as the ones I've got. I can add my floor finishes. That's going to put them under floor finishes. Now I need to rename them, no problem. Tiny Tools has got me covered. I can type in copy 1. I can then type in floor finishes, and I just renamed both of those. And if you imagine I had 20 stories, that would be a huge time saving. And now in each of these views, which I didn't have before, I've got my floor finishes, and I could use that annotate tag that I used earlier to be able to maybe tag these quickly with the floor finishes. Just add a quick color fill legend in here as well. So that's the two tools that I'm going to recommend, Align and Archlizer. And I did mention a third one. I'm going to mention this very, very quickly. If you've ever needed context in a project, if you've ever needed a map of where you're actually building something and you need the buildings or you need the roads or you need maybe even the trees, there is certain workflows that allow you to do this fairly well, maybe using SketchUp or things like that. But this placemaker tool is probably the best I have found and the most robust and consistent for bringing in context to Revit. So it'll actually project the map onto the topography, bring in the topography if you want, allow you to randomize building heights if they don't exist in the mapping data that it's using, layout roads, etc. It's really, really good. So like I said, I can't demonstrate that one, but I'm going to mention it just because it is a very good tool. I was previously using an add-in in Dynamo to do something similar, but it was nowhere near as robust or scalable as this is. So that's Dynamo. Those are the add-ins I'm going to recommend. You need a full license of Revit to be able to use add-ins. So you can't use LT with any of these, just as a sort of point to mention. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Rob, and Rob's going to take you through the interoperability tools, which are these tools here in relation to COBie and IFC. So Rob, if I can hand over to you. Thanks very much, everyone. I will be back in a bit.
Thank you, Johnny. Useful session. So just give me a couple of seconds while I share my screen. So for the purpose of this demo on the interoperability tools and the COBie model, or the COBie toolkit, sorry, I've got a simpler model just to keep everything straightforward today, keep everything easy to understand and easy to follow, and actually make the tool update and run a little bit quicker as well. Hopefully it makes things make a little bit more sense. And what I want to do is really talk through the process of using these interoperability tools and try and, whilst we're going to go through things quite quickly because of time constraints today, I want to make sure we explain things correctly so that you're not necessarily seeing the tool being run end to end with progress bars, but you're understanding the different options, the kind of outputs that they give you, and the processes that you should be following to get a decent COBie output on these models. So typically, the first thing I do is create a COBie asset view just to hide the bits and pieces in my Revit model that I don't want to see. And the easiest way to do that is to jump into a 3D view, put a selection window around the extent of the model, and then go up to filter. And essentially, we want to deselect our managed assets. So air terminals are going to be a managed asset. For this particular model, I want doors, electrical equipment. I do want furniture just because it's quite a small model. I want to get some bits and pieces in the COBie spreadsheet. We'll hide the levels. We don't actually want them showing for the purpose of this, although I could leave them on. Lighting fixtures will leave on. Mechanical equipment we'll leave on. Same with fixtures. Roofs will turn off, foundations, walls, but windows will leave on. So we create a quick filter. With that filter, we can then essentially right-click, and I just missed that there. Bear with me. So ceilings, floors, roofs, foundations, and walls. So what you're meant to do once you've got that filter is right-click, hide elements, just to hide the elements that you do not want to be appearing in your view. This way I can very quickly identify and select only the components that I want, in this case COBie, on within my model, which is really down to the client and their asset information requirements or operational information requirements to define what they're going to be wanting to control as a managed or maintainable asset. So typically it's mechanical equipment, electrical equipment, light fixings, valve units, so on and so forth, things that get maintenance or maintained regularly. You wouldn't necessarily have doors and windows, but for the purpose of this, I do. Now, once you've created that view, I've just got one that's pre-selected here with just the information I want. Generally, the first thing we need to identify is what we have in the model, because either yourself as a designer or the individual that has designed this could have created some of their own family components. They could have used some generic objects from the Revit library. They might have used some manufacturer-specific components downloaded from a manufacturer's website. And on top of that, they could also have used the MBS library, BIM object, or similar to download some, if you like, vetted BIM content. And that's great. But what we need to identify is that different types of model will work in very different ways. The interoperability tools that we have inside of Revit, if we just go to the interoperability tools tab, have defined workflows. And whilst you can chop, change, and tweak some of the setups to suit, there's really a defined correct path that you should be taking. Firstly, just to point out a couple of things, if I just scroll down to one of these light fittings here, you can see that this light fitting is an MBS component. So this has been downloaded from the MBS toolkit. And in that particular light fitting, if I go and look at its type properties, as you would expect, we have the level of information that's defined by the MBS. Okay, so as well as all of the Revit defined properties like the photometrics, we have IFC parameters, we have general information, including the Uniclass codes, the titles and the versions, and we have a load of other information linking to the level of definition or level of information that this particular component asks for. Now that's great, but there's also some potential problems that you need to be aware of there, and that's because different resources out there on the internet and different modelers out there or standards out there will align to different things. The MBS is a great example because their modeling standard aligns to the relevant BIM standards, such as your 8541s, such as your BS 1192 Part 4 and your ISO 19650s. And that's crucial when it comes to COBie. For instance, BS 1192 Part 4, which is COBie standard in the UK, defines that you must have a certain naming convention for your properties. These ones down here, warranty description in camel case, are a great example of that. They are compliant BS 1194 parameters. If you look at what the COBie toolkit inside of Revit will do for that, it will create a COBie dot something dot property. In other words, we're looking at type, so it's COBie dot type, and then the actual property itself. So if you're being true to the word, if you like, that property is not a BS 1192 Part 4 compliant property. The MBS one is. A lot of the time what we need to do is make sure that we have a workflow that takes a property from a defined or standardized location and makes it identifiable or recognizable to the COBie toolkit. Sorry. Another example in that is based on the Uniclass. So the Revit interoperability tools comes with a classification manager. The classification manager will control things like Uniclass, Omniclass, classifications depending on where you are in the world. And that will generally fill out these properties here. So if it's a system, it gives it an SS code and a description. If it's a product, it gives it a PR number and a PR description, so on and so forth. And they're all defined really easily in that we can simply select a component. And with that component selected, we can go to BIM interoperability tools. And we can say that we want to assign a classification. First, you must make sure that you go ahead and download the correct database. So we go to set up the classification manager and just save our database file to a relevant location on your machine or on your server before browsing to it and hitting finish. And then when we select a component, we can say BIM Metropolitan Tools assign, and it will look at that component and show me all of the relevant classifications, whether it's a facility because we're in a building, whether it's an element, that might be an element code or a PR code for a product, or a system code, SS. And we can go in and define based on what I have selected. So windows, opening products, window units, and I could say that this is a UPVC window unit. If I was to assign that, what it would do is it would take that particular code and under edit type, under those classification manager properties just here, you would get a classification number and a classification description. Note that these are not BS 1192 compliant locations, but they are locations that the COBie toolkit fully appreciates and understands. Typically what we find is the best way to work in this scenario is you have a Dynamo script, for instance, that understands where all the BS 1192 compliant properties are and what they'll be called, where any MBS specific properties are and what they'll be called, any BIM objects, where they are, what the properties are called. And then that controls the flow of that information from a compliant property into a location where the COBie toolkit would recognize it. That allows you to work with multiple different standards, even manufacturer's data that might not necessarily be linking to a given standard, for example. And it's a really neat way using some of the tools that you've already seen this morning from Johnny in Dynamo, where it's just creating a property mapping. But rather than tweaking property maps inside of COBie or the COBie toolkit, which it works, but it can be a bit finicky and it can break other things, we're saying leave that as it is, but take the data that we know is in a correct compliant location and put it somewhere where the COBie toolkit will recognize it. More on that shortly. So typically what we do is we create this kind of asset view and we make sure that all of our components have correct data, whether that's defining them a Uniclass value manually, whether that's mapping with Dynamo so it's in a location where it knows it exists, for example. We get a Uniclass value against our particular products. That's not just relating to the components, remember. So we're also talking about the project. So with nothing selected, if we went up to assign a classification, it would be looking at the facility. We've got complexes, CO, and entities, EN. We can also go into manage, and we can go to project parameters. Sorry, not project parameters, project information. And then we have a load of metadata in there, such as the classification. Okay. We've also got levels. So every different level in the building, as well as the information on components. Don't forget about the levels, because these levels, if they're a level with an asset, so in this case I have assets on the ground floor, COBie is hierarchical. We'll come to that in a second. But that means that the ground floor will also be extracted for COBie, and therefore that ground floor will also need to be classified and have information against it. So everything that relates to the COBie, you will need to define and use. Now, before we jump in proper, I'm just going to go ahead and open up a COBie example, which is actually from this model on the screen, just to talk about it ever so briefly before we get into it properly. So yes, this is an Excel-based spreadsheet. Okay, it's formatted text. COBie is a standard way of collating information for handover of a building, a BIM, building information modeling, a BIM model. And what it is defined as is a common standard or a common structure to work from. Don't think COBie and Excel. Yes, Excel is a way where it can handle that structured data, but COBie itself can be XML based, it can be Excel based, it can be based within an IFC. And actually, so long as you've got the data within your native model, you can also use that as well. But generally speaking, Excel is the tool that we use for transitioning exporting, importing, and working with that data. And this just shows you the hierarchical workflow. So we have contacts that build up the information within the COBie. They work on a facility. So in this case, we have a building. That building contains floors. Those floors contain rooms or spaces. And then we're starting to get a bit more specific. Each one of these color codes is showing you how that data is being treated by COBie. And to give you one example on that, if I go to those Uniclass codes, they're what we call pick lists. So everything is hierarchical. A facility must link to floors and vice versa. Okay? A space must link to floors, and the floors generally have spaces in them. That means that when we look at office number 2 here, we can see that there's a direct link to my ground floor. We can also see there's a direct link to an element within my 3D native model, or in my IFC model, my open BIM model. We can see that we have some metadata that's optional, and we have some metadata that's required. These pick lists here, and this is important from a COBie perspective, so these SL codes and descriptions, they need to exist within my pick lists, which have been defined by the client inside of COBie. In other words, all of my classifications and my categories are defined within my COBie. What this is meant to be is a single database, if you like, or a single source of truth for everything within there, so that we have not just components, but elements of the building, levels, rooms, the components themselves, how they link to the 3D model, and how they link to each other. Spaces sit within zones. A zone or a space could have any type of component in which has individual instances, so on and so forth. If we strip that back and jump back into Revit here and just go through the workflow, it's not actually that difficult, but there are a number of properties and tools and workflows that you just need to be careful of. So once we're ready to go, we have our COBie extension here. It's now installed by default inside of Revit. It used to be a default, an optional install, but for the last couple of years or so, it's been default out of the box, which means it's constantly updated through the Autodesk app, which is great. More recently, we've got this Setup Families tool. We're not going to use that today, but that allows you to push COBie ready information or COBie ready data into your library of components. That's really useful if you're a design house or an architect or something like that, and you've got a library of components that aren't COBie ready. We can make them more aligned to COBie before we use them, making the next process more straightforward as we come along. Generally speaking, though, once we're at this point, first thing we do is head over to contacts. We would define a contact within the COBie extension. We can use one if it already exists. If you're starting from scratch, it won't. And generally speaking, we add a contact, fill out all of its information before saving and closing. You need to define a contact to make sure that whatever you export out of COBie has a contact assigned to it. And the likelihood is you're going to set up 1, 2, or even more of those contacts specific to the design team that you're working on. Once you've defined the contact, we typically then set the project up. Pretty straightforward workflow this. Nice, easy to understand interface. We have a load of tabs on the left. If you're unfamiliar with the names, you can expand that if you want to. But generally, we're working top to bottom. In our general setup, we define the location, how we want to identify the Revit components. So do we want to use the BAT ID from Revit, or do we want to use a GUID, the Global Unique Identifier? Generally, that would be down to the client's understanding or the client's requirement. Typically for COBie, you would use the GUID, and that would be what this long number is here within your COBie. So everything from a space, to a type, to a floor, to a system, everything when you start pulling it out will have a unique identifier, so it can be linked from the COBie to the model, to the IFC, to the Revit file, whatever it might be. Okay, so this is your GUID. You could have the Revit BAT ID in there if you'd rather, but typically keep it as GUID. Define any units. We can leave these as default. I like to change them specifically, so we are, if we're working in metric, millimeters, square meters, and cubic meters. And then how we're defining things like areas. Again, in this case, we're just going to leave that as the default, but we can put something else in there. Okay. This isn't necessarily going to do anything with regards to calculation, but what it will do on the COBie is it will tell it that the units that we're using are based on this default area calculation. Okay. That's why you have the ability to type in there something else. Okay. Because all that's doing is it's putting whatever is in that dialog box on the COBie spreadsheet to say this is how areas have been defined. This locality, by the way, all that's doing is it's picking up on a template. So the COBie spreadsheet that Revit can produce, as well as the schedules and the information that it's using to produce that, are all based on templates in the back end. Dependent on whether you choose US or UK COBie, it will pick a different template from the program files. And also the schedules that you choose to use later on will be picked up from there as well. Once we've done our general setup, we move on to each individual element. And again, remember that hierarchy we have in COBie. So we have spaces, we have types of component, the individual instances of those, then we have systems, so on and so forth. So the first thing I do is go to my spaces. This is defining where the COBie toolkit is going to look for maintainable assets. You want to be careful with this one. It comes with a pretty good default setup, but remember what you are doing as a designer. Are you MEP biased? Are you architecturally biased? Are you structural biased? Where are the elements that you are responsible for? Are they held within rooms, a room in Revit, or are they held within space, a space in Revit? From a COBie perspective, everything is a space. It doesn't matter whether it's an architectural room or an MEP space. But from a Revit standpoint, it's important to identify where those objects are. Now, for the purpose of this example today, everything sits within a room. So I've said room for everything. But if you know that you do have air terminals, which generally sit within the room, you would choose it. If you knew that you had mechanical equipment that sits within the space, you would choose it. Okay. Again, the default classification works pretty well, but make sure it aligns to you as a company and as an individual. And then against each one of these, we have a name builder. We have a preview down the bottom, several Revit properties, and a separator. COBie shouldn't have spaces in the name. Camel case is good. Underscores or separators work well, but it shouldn't have spaces. Every name also needs to be unique. So you just need to be careful with things like that. But what we're doing is we're adding fields from Revit's properties, and it's using those to build up a preview. So in this case, my spaces will be called whatever name they are. So let's say office _002. Okay. There are some requirements around certain standards like 8541 and BS 1192 about how those naming conventions should sit up. We then define whether we want every space in its own row. Yes, we do. Or whether we want all spaces in a single row, comma separated. No, we don't. So generally speaking, the top one. We then have a very similar setup for every type of component. So a type in COBie is a type in Revit. So I can have two types of table, but I can have several instances of those. I can have 3 types of door, but umpteen instances of those. A type in COBie is the same way. So we have a name builder. Again, that must be a unique name for every single type. And again, it's just using a separator to link Revit properties. We can customize and tweak these as they see fit. Because we're looking at a component, we tell Revit how it should be classified, in this case using Uniclass. In COBie, the category is the classification. In the UK, that should be Uniclass, and it should always be the Uniclass code, a colon, and then the Uniclass description. So we set up that the classification manager is key with no second and no third priority. We define how we want a description to be picked up, and we just say that we want to use the description parameter from the type properties. Pretty much the same thing for components. We build a name using the same configuration. Systems is an important one. Again, we have the same classifications. Again, we have the same name builder. But then we have 2 important areas. Excel, if you're using it to transition and transfer the COBie between sources, is limited to 1 million rows. Doesn't sound like much. In large MEP files, you will get to that very, very quickly. In large federated designs, you'll get to it even quicker. So you need to be careful about this. Generally speaking, each component in a system should be listed in its own row. Okay, so every component in its own individual row listed as domestic hot water, domestic cold water, hydronic supply, return, so on and so forth. Not comma separated. But if you're having issues getting it out, it might be that you're hitting a 1 million row limit and you want to be going in there. Okay. Remember, this is only systems. You're not necessarily going to hit 1 million rows, but you will if you tick this tick box on a large project. This tick box I'm not a fan of at all. It should be unticked, and the reason being is this overrides other options inside of this toolkit. So what this tick box will do is it will take any system that you have, it will look within that system for every component that's made up that system, and it will put it onto the type spreadsheet or the type tab in COBie, and it'll put it onto the component tab in COBie. What that essentially means is straight bits of ducts, elbows, T's, things that you wouldn't list in COBie because they're not maintainable. There's hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of them on a project. And it's just irrelevant. You wouldn't want them on there. By ticking that box, you will get incorrect results. Your COBie export will take forever, and you will probably hit a 1 million row limit, which will crash the process. So please untick that box. Don't tick it. The next one is attributes. Attributes are an important way where we can control additional stuff. COBie is great because it formats data in a standardized way, but actually what it asks for is quite small. So if you look at a individual component, for example, be it a door, if we look at a fire door, for example, we have some required information, which is always required no matter what. We have information that links it to the geometry, and then we have optional information dependent on whether the client needs it. For a door, you'll notice that it doesn't once in there mention something important like fire rating or acoustic rating or something like that. Even if I went down to the type, if I go and look at types, this has got to be able to capture any component, not just doors or facades or whatever else that might be. So what's key is that the properties that it's asking for or looking for are quite generic. Not all of them are going to be useful for a client or an asset management team, or even to put into a CAFM system. What's key is that we have a way of capturing the data that is important, and we do that via the attribute sheet. That's a way in which we can take a client's asset information requirements and capture them, link them to a component within the model, give them values and units, and link them to something within 3D space. Within the BIM interoperability tools, the attribute tab is what creates that section of the handover. Don't tick everything. You'll hit the 1 million row limit, especially on larger projects. Be very selective. The idea here is you choose the singular parameters that the client has asked for on their handover. So in this case, we say fire rating. If the client was also asking for I don't know, let's go with the thermal resistance, we could come and tick that one as well, specific to doors. Okay? All too many times I see too many people just coming in and saying, select everything, because I want to export ceilings and all the properties. And what that will do is it will create a real messy attribute sheet with a load of data that the client's just never going to use. Only tick the properties that you need outside of the standard COBie ones. How will objects be located? Their coordinates. Do you want to use the location point or line from the family, or a bounding box? Choose the relevant one for components, rooms, spaces, and floors. Define on the next selection how you would like to manage the data. Would you like schedules to be placed inside of Revit to make the modification or editing of those properties easier? Generally speaking, yes, you would. So go ahead and choose the schedules that will be relevant for you. And again, they're just hosted in a Revit RTE template that's within the program files for the interoperability tools. It will just pull those in using transfer project standards, essentially, from one project to the other. You do have the ability to create mappings, and all I'll say here is be very careful. The COBie toolkit works really well, but it's defined really well. It's defined that I know that I need to go to a property called COBie.type.createdOn, and whatever value's in there, that's what get pushed out to my spreadsheet or my IFC or my XML or whatever it is that you're exporting to. If you're using this toolkit, I would highly recommend you leave these mappings by default. I'm going to show you how to use them, but I'd recommend you leave them as they are and leverage something like Dynamo. If you've got a property from the MBS, from a BS 1192 compliance, from a manufacturer's specific component, create some Dynamo scripts to grab that data and put it in one of these so that the COBie toolkit knows where it is. That way it gets updated as necessary. It doesn't get missed. It doesn't get missed out. Because if I change one of these parameters, let's go ahead and grab the Uniclass one, for example. So if we come down to COBie.type.category, okay, this by default through the options is looking at the classification manager. If I change that, all of that breaks. So my Uniclass code wouldn't come across from the classification manager. And that wouldn't just be for one or two components, that would be all of them. So what we need to do is be very careful about changing these. You can do. So if I never had a property there, I could come in and say that I want to link this to a different parameter. I could add parameters to say, go and look at Uniclass 2015 code from the MBS, and then go and look at adding a fixed piece of text, like a semicolon, or a full colon, sorry, and then we could add another property in here which said Uniclass 2015 description. That would then give you your category, but that would then fall over for anything that isn't a BS 1192 defined component or an MBS family or whatever it might be. So all I'm saying as a word of warning is whilst you can change these, you're probably best off not to. Once you've defined those, we can export that configuration to use time and time again. So I can come and export this as an XML file and then import it into a different project, import it later on down the line, and use that setup in other locations. Because actually, whilst there are some project-specific stuff in there, it's quite generic. We have a zones tool. Our zones tool, we come in and define zones within our building. And we basically then drag and drop rooms into those zones. This is all nicely driven by this preview over here. So as I select rooms or as I select zones, it will highlight them for me. Every room or space must be linked to a zone from a COBie perspective. Once we've done that, we go to select and we choose our assets. We don't say select all. We choose only the components that we want to pull data from. So our maintainable assets only, nothing else. Remember, we don't include floors, we include levels. So you need to always choose levels in order to fill out the floor tab. Because a floor is a concrete slab, not COBie. A floor in COBie is a level, a defined level in the building. So we go for it, define, excuse me, our COBie components. We can't work with groups, so if you have got groups in there, you will need to ungroup them. And once we've done that, we can then go ahead and hit update. When you hit update, I'm not going to do it now, but when you hit update, it will go through every component that you have selected, and it will go and look at your project setup and start filling those parameters so that every component then has a set of COBie data against its instance properties, against its type properties. And that is all aligned to what you set up through Setup Project. Generally speaking, you go through that process several times. We update, we go through and update everything once to begin with, and then we say only update things that are blank. We can get it to automatically put NA if we don't have a value so that we're COBie compliant. Choose what contact created this, and away we go. Okay, that goes through, and it takes a couple of seconds, couple of minutes, depending on the output. But that updates the data. The next thing you want to leverage is the Revit Model Checker. The Revit Model Checker is a really nice way where we can check, yes, COBie compliance, but also we can check other stuff. Just to run through it really briefly today, with that default install, I can go to Setup. I can choose that I want to look at a default library downloaded from the Autodesk Cloud. Let's go with COBie extension validation and press OK. But it's worth pointing out you can do other checks. You can create your own checks. Once you've downloaded that check file, it will give you a list of all of the different rule sets, checking that parameters exist, making sure that the formatting of certain fields is correct. We can save. And with that set up now, we're basically going to say that we want to run our model through a checking procedure to make sure that we are hitting what we would expect to hit for a given data drop. And you might set this up to have different checks at different stages. So at drop 1, you want to be X amount of percent through. Drop 2, you want to be further on X amount of percent. We can run this on multiple models. We can run it on linked models. So I'm just going to run it on this one. It's pretty quick, depending on the size of your model. And this literally goes through and looks at your properties, looks at the value, and then scores them against that defined set of rules. And actually what's quite nice is you get a percentage score, and then it lists all of the different passes, failures, and the score against those. So in this case, for example, I can see that if I come down and look at spaces, I've only got a 57% pass rate. Okay, 7 checks, 4 have passed and 3 have failed. If I go and look at spaces to see why, we can see that spaces are missing their Uniclass classifications, they're missing their description, and they're missing a room tag. So quite important areas. I can go on to one of those and see all of the rooms that have failed on there. I can press the magnifying glass, which will go and show a view in Revit, select that particular component, and then I can come in and identify, okay, there's no category. And actually the reason is probably because it doesn't have a Uniclass classification. So I would go in and define a Uniclass classification and go and update the COBie tool again. What you have in here is a really nice way in which you can internally check and validate that at least you're where you need to be for each requirement on COBie drop. Okay? You're not necessarily going to look for 100% all the way along unless you've got specific rule checks that say, I'm only checking what's needed for stage 1, stage 2, or drop 2, drop 3. But it's a nice way that we can check that internally. We can export the report to Excel, we can put it into HTML, we can copy it to the clipboard. But as a Revit user, to have this open on another screen and be able to systematically now go through and check that everything's as it should be before I produce my output or before I send this to shared on the CDE, whatever it might be. It's a nice tool. Off the back of that, there's so much more that you can do with this Revit Model Checker, from checking that you've used the relevant standards, the right styles, you've got the right sheets, there's no views missing from sheets, dimension styles are as they should be, the right phase has been used, the right template's been used. We can actually check for general Revit model quality and validation on top of specific things like COBie. Once we've been through that process, if we need to, we can create our spreadsheet. Our spreadsheet, if I just come in and say, put RB1 on the end as a new file and create it, that'll create the file and allow me to open it. If you get any hanging at that point, it's probably that you're pushing the limits of Excel or are running on a very large file. So just bear in mind what it's doing, bear in mind Excel's row limit. But from that, we have a nice COBie output here, which based on those results is about 80 or 90% compliant. So it's missing a little bit of data, but you know, from Revit to be able to do this directly, I'm not a big fan myself of pushing the Excel straight out of Revit. I think there are more federated project-wide tools that can be used for that. But generally speaking, to bring your Revit model in alignment with the COBie standard and to make sure that you have that COBie standard defined, the right objects have their properties, it works really well. And really for the purpose of today, that's what I wanted to get across. So we've talked about briefly some rulings and some setup. We've talked about leveraging Dynamo to link standardized project properties with the COBie toolkit parameters. We've talked about the classification manager, and if you don't have a classification, we can use that to our advantage. Remember to classify everything, not just the components, the building, the levels, the rooms, everything. We've talked about using the COBie toolkit to configure and define and set up our property links. We've shown that we can customize the attributes form, that we can check the quality of our COBie, and when necessary and if necessary, we can export the XLSX COBie Excel format if we want to. But again, if it's in the data, if it's in the file, you could also go out to IFC. You could go out to XML. You could just share the native file. It depends on the client's requirements, which are key here. So really, that's all I wanted to cover in this section. So I hope that's been useful. I'll hand you back now to Johnny, and we will go through some of the collaboration workflows using BIM 360.
Hi there. As promised, we're going to run through the issues tool that's now available inside of Revit using several different workflows. So we're going to be looking at the 2 different workflows that you can use from BIM 360 in this case. So I'm going to be running an issue directly from a model back to Revit, fixing the issue, and then talking about the workflow. And we'll also be looking at model coordinate as well. So we'll be working through a clash, creating the issue in BIM 360, and then pushing that to Revit to be able to fix, and then how the communication works in that case as well. So I'll jump right into it. The first thing to just mention about the first workflow is that you only need BIM 360 docs to be able to do this workflow. I'm just going to show a basic issue that you might want to communicate to a designer for them to be able to fix, and then for them to be able to push back any kind of tasks or any kind of communication that you need back to make sure that they've done the work. So what I've got here is a cloud-based model. The dormitory, this is a work shed model, but this could equally work with just a non-work shed model as well that's hosted in Autodesk Docs. If you are work sharing, you obviously need BIM 360 design as well, but you could just have this model as a standalone model, and then you could just use BIM 360 docs in this case. So like I say, I'm going to create an issue. One of the first things just to mention about the new issues tool is it only works at the moment in 3D views. You can kind of get around that by using the split screen views inside of BIM 360 docs. So if you've got an issue that you need to create in a certain location, you can find that on the 2D view. You could then select the element, which is the problem. So perhaps maybe this door is the wrong spec. And I need to communicate that to the designer to be able to change. So find the door in the view, and then I can put the issue directly onto that door in the 3D view. So I'm just going to pop this here, and I'm just going to add a little title of spec change. It won't be very specific, and I'll assign that to myself and give myself a due date of 2 days in this case. So now that I've got this issue, like I said, I'm not going to add too much into it. I'll just create this. What I'm going to be able to do now that I've got this issue is pick this up in, well, the designer is going to get an email that this issue has first been created. I'd obviously go around this model and add everything I want that designer perhaps to do. The designer is then going to get the email, and then they can follow that up. So they can look at the issues in BIM 360 perhaps before they go away and do this, but obviously we want to pick those issues up now in Revit. So I'm going to quickly flick to Revit to fix this issue. I'm going to pick it up. So we've gone from maybe the design manager who is reviewing the drawings, reviewing the model, and then communicating back to the designer what it needs to change. So now I'm taking on the role of the designer. We're going to look at this in the architect's case here. So this is the model that we're going to be working with. And I'm just opening this up from inside Revit through the BIM 360 portal that we have. So it shouldn't take too long to download. Once this is loaded up, a couple of things to mention about how you actually get the issues tool. If you go into your Autodesk Manage portal on a browser, you'll be able to find it in the product updates area. Likewise, you should also be able to find it in the Autodesk app that you would download your software or any updates for your software. And once you've got it, it's going to add a tab in along the top that looks like this. So we have issues. One thing to note is that as this progresses, this will move into probably the Collaborate tab, so that it won't take up its own tab along the top here. So now that we're inside of Revit, I need to find a view to be able to fix this in. I'm going to head to a 3D view because, like I say, it only actually works in 3D views at the moment, this specific tool. But there are ways that you can kind of get around that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to manage my issues. If I just refresh this, any issues that have been added will just pop up into this list, but you could see it was already there. I can then click on this spec change here. This is probably going to struggle to actually find that door in this view because we have the rest of the building in the way. But that's not actually a problem because it selects the door. So you can see here it's selected the door. So what I could do in this case is I could just head to a view where I know I can see that door. So maybe this GA first floor. And then if I zoom in, I think I might have got the wrong floor. There we go. So we've got the door now. So I know exactly which door it is. It's still selected here. And then I can just come into here and change that door spec. So I can maybe change it to the smaller door that I have here. Once I've made that change, I would then choose to answer that issue. So you can imagine maybe I go around these 10 issues that have been sent to me, answer this with a comment back to the design manager about the spec change. So I'll choose to add spec change here. One really cool function actually while we're here in this issues area is the ability to be able to attach documents to the issue as well from here. Now I use a little snipping tool called ScreenRec, but you could use the snipping tool. The reason I like ScreenRec is because it allows you to add notations. So just quickly to show you how that works, if I take a little snapshot, add a little piece of text. So you can imagine maybe there's things that I need to communicate back to the designer, design manager, perhaps in this case, that are just things that might be better communicated via some markups. I can just drag and drop that markup into the attachments as an image, and then that's going to be reviewable back in BIM 360 docs. All of this is, of course, tracked through the activity log on the far right-hand side. And as well as being able to add attachments, if this issue needed to be maybe involve somebody else, you could add that person into here and ask them a question. There we go. Is this the correct spec? And you can treat it as the kind of place where you might replace the emails that were going backwards and forwards, so that we've got all of the information about this change or about this issue, about this task, maybe design issue, code compliance, whatever it is, we've got it all in this issue to be able to follow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head back to BIM 360 and pick up the answer as the design manager. What I'm going to do while I'm doing that is I'm just going to close this model down. I'll save it first. And then what I'm going to do is I'll publish this back up to BIM 360 docs so that we can actually see that change. Now, this might take a little bit of time, but I'll just talk through some things while we're in BIM 360 docs and that's happening. There's just a few things that I need to do from Revit to be able to publish that to BIM 360 docs. So I'm going to choose to publish that model now. So the reason you need to publish this is obviously you wouldn't want all your changes going backwards and forwards all the time to BIM 360 docs. You might not want some of the changes that you've made as the designer to automatically upload to BIM 360 docs. So this publish process is what you've got in between the times that you've made the changes and then pushed those changes back up to BIM 360 docs. So I'll let that process. I'll head back into BIM 360 docs. I'll just close this model down and I can just quickly head to my issues. And we can just have a quick look at that answered issue here. So I've got all of that data. You can see here that this is on the browser now. We've had that answered. That's been updated. As the design manager, I would have got an email to say that it had been answered and it would have taken me to this issue. I'd be able to review things like the any attachments that have been added in there. So if there was some markups and things like that, that would also be something I could view. I could have a look at what has been written into the activity. So maybe there was some notes in there that I could add or that have been added by Robin that I might need to review. All of this is in that one location. That's the real usefulness of this. And the issue itself is actually against the version. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be able to view it on the next version of the model. It just means that I know that that was the version that I made those markups in. And so that was on version 2. And what we're going to see now is version 3 become available. So this shouldn't take too much longer to upload. It does take a little bit of time for that architecture, for a model to upload. It's not one of the biggest models, but it is converting the model into something that BIM 360 docs can read. While that's uploading, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to jump to the next part of the next process that we'll look at, just to really discuss it. Ooh, actually, we've got this uploaded now. So I'll do this because just keep things on track. So what I can do now as the design manager at the end of this workflow is head back into this model. I can quickly have a look at my issues, check the spec change. So checking whether that door, maybe I can just hit show all objects, check whether that door is the correct spec now. So I could select it, I'd be able to check the properties, make sure that it is the correct spec. And once I was happy with this particular issue being fixed, like I say, what I could also do is review this in the 2D sheet here. One of the cool things about this being able to do this is actually if you select something in this sheet, it selects it in the 3D model. And likewise, if I select something in the model, I just show all objects, select the door, it actually does the same on the sheet. So this is where you can get around that 2D that 2D workflow and the fact that the issues are only available in 3D. You can just use the fact that in Revit it selects the element you've put the issue on, and inside of BIM 360 when you select the element in 3D it selects the thing on the sheet. So you can actually quite easily get around the fact that you can only use it in 3D. And once I'm happy with this change, I can select the issue. Like I say, I'm happy with this one, and I can then close this out as the design manager and add any comments that I might want to add. And obviously then all of the communication that's happened in that issue is then saved. It's somewhere where I can access it, and I'll be able to go back to it if anything comes up later on where that was an issue. So that's the first workflow. You can do that using just Autodesk Docs at the moment. I've been using a work shared model, and so this would require BIM 360 design. Sorry, I'm getting confused between Autodesk Docs, but BIM 360 Docs is what we're talking about now. So you could use BIM 360 Docs to do this, or you could be using BIM 360 design. It just depends whether the model you're working with is a work shared model or not. So I'll close that down. So that was the first workflow. The second workflow we're going to be looking at is going to require a license of BIM 360 Coordinate. And that's going to give you this model coordination module here. Now, one of the things I've set up in this project is that because I'm using BIM 360 design, the models are shared in a certain way that will mean that whenever a model is shared, perhaps on a Friday, at the end of 2 weeks, they go into this folder here. And what BIM 360 Coordinate allows you to do is to point to a folder inside of BIM 360 Docs, and you can get the model coordination tool to basically suck all of the models from that folder up and then automatically clash them. So what we've got in here is and you can do this with different folders. So I've pointed at that shared folder, and in that shared folder I have the most recent architectural, electrical, and mechanical models. But you can actually point to any folder. So you could create model coordination spaces for the specific industries. Perhaps the architects want to be able to clash detect their models as they're working. Likewise, the electrical, likewise the HVAC. And they could be doing that in BIM 360 Docs. BIM 360 Coordinate. And that would just allow them then, as they're working, perhaps up to that 2 weekly date, to just spell check their models, make sure that there isn't any kind of hard clashes that are going to come up in the next meeting. So I'm going to use the shared folder, the most recently shared models that I have. Perhaps this might be a contractor doing this. Maybe this is something that the architect might do as part of their contract. But I've got the models now, and I get this nice matrix in here. And like I said, this is happening automatically. It's just taking the models that I have and just clashing them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an example of perhaps a model that has quite a lot of clashes. So this HVAC has quite a lot of clashes with the architectural model. So this might be early stages. There might not be openings yet in the walls for the HVAC to pass through, which is why I would get quite a lot of clashes like I am here. So this list is quite long. Probably not something that you want to work your way through because there's just so many things here that are exactly the same thing. So one of the things you can do is you can actually group by system names. So this really shortens this and allows you to quickly have a look at multiple different clashes in the model. So based on the systems that I have here, it's showing me what's clashing with particular parts of the architectural model. And a lot of these might not be clashes. I could also do it by type name as well. So I've got 47 clashes for the type name, the flange radius bend. And so there's just different ways of viewing these clashes, but a lot of these might not actually be clashes. What I might do in this case is actually switch the primary model with the HVAC model. So this is going to allow me then to grab the lights. In this case, I'm hoping I can pick up on the lights here. So if I just choose perhaps this wall, there's a lot of interfaces here which actually aren't issues. For instance, this panel that we have here might not actually be an issue. So what I could do with this interface, the interface clashes I have here, is I can just say that this isn't an issue, and then I can give a reason. So I could say this is a valid interface, and then choose OK. And so there is the option to wean out anything that actually isn't a clash in this case. Perhaps this early on you wouldn't actually be clashing these. You wouldn't start maybe clashing them until we've got the piercings in the walls and things like that, just because dampers haven't been put in and there hasn't been that kind of level of design. But something that might be important is maybe the HVAC versus the electrical. So I have 4 clashes here. If I click on these clashes, it's only going to give me those 2 models, so it's quite easy to see where those clashes are and what they are. So if I head to one of these clashes, we can see that there is an issue here. This is something that we might need to sort out, and we would need to decide who's going to be the person fixing this. So the primary model at the moment is the mechanical. I'm going to say it's their remit to reroute this particular duct. So I'm going to set this up as an issue. So choose what I want to choose as an issue, choose the issue. Then I need to put the marker actually on the element that needs to be sorted out. So I'm going to put it on this duct here. And I'm going to assign that to myself, give myself a due date of 2 days. All this metadata is really useful to fill in when you want to find these issues later on. So now that that's marked up, what I can do is I can head back to Revit. So perhaps, like I say, I'm the contractor, perhaps I'm my own company who is clashing those models, but I'm just communicating those clashes back again to the designer to have to fix. So this time I'm going to open up the mechanical model. And obviously, you wouldn't normally have access to all the models. There are permissions that you can set up, so you would just see the folders that are relative to whatever company you're working with. So I'm going to open up the mechanical services. And it's going to be very much the same process. There isn't really going to be much difference in terms of how I go about finding this, how I go about fixing this. The only difference is going to be the process when I load it back up to BIM 360 docs as to when that clash is fixed, because this model needs to be shared. If this model is being shared, say, on a bi-weekly term, then that you will not see that fixed until it's actually published through the BIM 360 design interface. So it depends on what that model coordination module, the module folder it's actually pointing at, gets this. But it's the same process, the same story here. I can go to manage issues. I can just refresh what I've got here. What I'm actually, I think, going to need to do here is to choose where I've got my issues. So this is a really interesting part of this issues, the way these issues work. In BIM 360 docs, it's very likely that you'll have multiple models. So maybe a work in progress model, a shared model, and potentially another folder that you're sharing to. And it's useful to have that divide. It wouldn't be, say, useful to have one model where it's work in progress, where everybody can see everything that's happening. So what I need to do in this case is I actually need to load the issue from another model, which is the model that has been shared to that model coordination module. So if I click load issues, it's going to open this window here. It's looking for any model inside of BIM 360 that is the same as this one. And then it's going to give me a list of the number of issues against those models. And it also gives me the path as well and the last updated. I might need to just set this one going again. Oh no, there we go. So in this case, we can see here that we have one in the consumed folder for where the electrical, so the electrical team have a consumed file of mine, and that probably wouldn't have any issues against it most of the time. You probably wouldn't have access to this normally, and so that wouldn't normally show up. But one of them that I would normally have access to might be this shared HVAC model here. So I can select this. I could probably unselect this because these issues actually aren't things I'm looking at in terms of the clashes. They were the ones that are being dedicated to the design team through perhaps the design manager. So I can open up the issues against that other model. And what I should see in the top of that list is the issue that I created against that rectangular duct. So I can select it. And one of the cool things as well that this does is it does put these giant yellow balls on here, and it makes the one that you've selected bigger than the rest, so it's quite easy to find. It will actually color code them as well, so once this is answered, they will show up in blue, which is also quite useful. But sometimes you might want to just turn them off so that you can see exactly what you're working on. And yes, in this view, I can actually see that interaction that's happened here. So there would be something maybe that I would need to change. If I was being quite brutal, I guess, about this change, perhaps what I might do here, or not very design savvy, I should say, is to just grab a flex duct and work my way around that light. There we go. So the issue is fixed. I can then answer the question. Hopefully no one does that kind of a design normally, and just say flex duct used. And then hit done. And so it's very much the same process. I would do exactly what I did with the previous model, in that I would close this down, publish the model back to BIM 360 docs, and then once the model had been updated, either in the shared folder or whether that clash was happening in my own folder, whenever this model had got to that point, the model coordination module will look for that newer model, clash the results, and you would see that this has been fixed. So that's the workflow with model coordination. There isn't really too much difference, but that really shows off this load issues feature here that allows you to get issues from other models that are located in BIM 360. So the other workflow that we can use to gather issues is using Navisworks as well. And it's much the same story. You could clash your models using Navisworks instead. You can use the coordinate there is an issues module inside of Navisworks to create the issues, and it might be exactly the same process again. So it looks and feels exactly the same as we have looked inside of Revit. So I hope that's been useful to have a look at that issues feature. It's only available at the moment in Revit 2020 and 2021, but it, like I said, very, very powerful tool to have that kind of conversation and communication, and maybe do away with emails as much as we might have used them before, and to just have that kind of information at our fingertips and be able to have the ability to be able to see that project progressing. So thanks very much, guys. If there are any questions or you'd like to have a demonstration of this issues tool, please get in touch with us at Man and Machine. I know there's been a lot of questions as we've been going. I'm very poor at multitasking, so I haven't been keeping up with them. But Rob, would you like to help me out with the Q&A? Should we do a sort of panel session for the answering of this?
I can do that. I think actually the ones that are up there are mostly answered, but what I'll do, I'll just grab the screen from you just to get a nice holding screen up. So let's do that and share my screen over there. Good. So firstly, I hope that was really useful. We've seen a number of different things this morning, from some Revit 101 to some time saving and some intricacies around using a digital model and a different digital workflow, and how that can just benefit you as an organization, not only if you're working in BIM methodologies, but just generally. And then we've looked at some of the more precise workflows. We've looked a little bit at COBie in a very compressed time frame, and some BIM 360 as well. So we've gone through an awful lot in a short space of time. Just to start off, if you do have a question that we've not yet answered, in the panel on the right of your screen, it will probably be, you've got the ability to ask us a question. Please do so. We'll be on for another 15 minutes or so. I've had the same question about 4 or 5 times about the Dynamo scripts from Stephen and from Chris. So thank you for those questions. Absolutely, we're happy to share the scripts that we've shown on Dynamo today. The one thing I will say is that Dynamo scripts don't work for everyone, dependent on their workflows and dependent on their actual requirements. So whilst I'm absolutely happy to share those scripts, what I would say is, if you would like them, please get in touch and let's make sure that they're going to work in your situation and your scenario. So reach out to us, let's have a discussion, and off the back of that, we're more than happy to provide those scripts for you, and at least point you in the right direction rather than handing you some scripts that potentially won't work. So absolutely, yes. We had a question about the Revit model checker earlier, which I answered, but I will reiterate it as I skimmed over it pretty quickly, which was from Adam. So Adam asked if the Revit model checker can work against custom property sets. And again, the answer is absolutely yes. I showed a very small segment of that Revit model checker, but actually it's quite a powerful tool in that not only can you check standard Revit properties, custom Revit properties, project-based properties, shared parameters, we can also check things like, has the right template been used? Do the right families exist? Are the right styles or sheet formats being used? So we can actually go in and check Revit best practice, make sure we don't have 8,000 warnings in the model, for example, before we do a data drop and share it into a shared environment. So that toolkit, which you have, all of you pretty much on this call, it's been available since Revit 2016, I think. You all have access to that, and it's such a powerful tool that you can just get some quick wins out of. Have a look at it, open it up, and reach out if you want some advice on how best to use it. But it does a lot more than just the COBie checking. That was just scratching the surface. What else have we got? Yes.
Robin, I've had a question through. Just that it's on the in respect to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. When will the team be looking to do demonstrations of the newly branded applications? I think that's come through quite a few times.
Yeah, sure. So we are under NDA. We can't show the product until the 9th of February, which is the release date as it stands. We have demonstration videos ready to go for the main ones, but we cannot share them with you until the 9th. So what you can expect from me and my team is that on launch day, YouTube will have full demonstrations of the products. We might even do an off-the-cuff one of these demonstrating those products. That's more me thinking aloud, maybe for Nathan and Ellie to take some notes about trying to get an hour in the diary just to do one on launch day, because it's always nice to see the product as soon as it's launched. So as soon as we are able, we will share. But if I reiterate something, is we have access, we're using them, and we are very excited about what it's bringing to the standard AEC collection user, and the fuller functionality of things like Autodesk Build. So watch this space.
Brilliant. I think if you're happy, Robin, Johnny, we'll take some of the other questions offline. I know there's been quite a few that have come through, and I'd certainly encourage for the people that do have questions that haven't necessarily had a chance to ask you to get in touch with the team. The account managers are available to speak, likewise with the technical team, and Johnny, myself, Robin are here to help in that respect. So do pick up the phone or drop us an email or messages through the chat here, and we can pick them up. But thank you very much, Johnny and Robin. It was a really detailed overview. I think there's a lot to take away. And like I say, I'd encourage anyone that was on the call to just get in touch. So we're more than happy to help.
Perfect. So just to reiterate that, I guess, yeah, thanks from me. There was one last question that I'll answer that's popped in at the last minute from Stephen about the issues functionality. Does it only work with Coordinate? So Johnny, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the issues functionality from Revit and Navisworks just works with issues in general in BIM 360. So I believe that it also works from issues within docs as well as within the design or coordinate space. Is that correct, Johnny?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah. In fact, if you just have docs and you're not work sharing, you can still host a model on BIM 360 docs as long as it's not work shared, and you can still use those issues. So you don't need BIM 360 coordinate or BIM 360 design to be able to use the issues, I suppose, is to be concise.
Perfect. Thanks, Johnny. Great. Okay, so can't see any more questions coming in. By all means, contact us offline. Reach out, engage with us about any questions that you've got from the event or indeed anything else. We're always helpful. Yes, we're always helpful, but we're always happy and interested to talk about you and your projects and your struggles and your achievements and successes as well. So thank you ever so much for joining us this morning from me and my team here. It's been a pleasure to talk with you this morning, and we can't wait to see you again soon. Thanks very much.